Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of The Whites of Their Eyes. I'm Dan DeFore, and I hope this will be the first of many episodes of me hosting for you of what I hope to be a larger culture cast, is what I've been calling it in my head. Eventually, I'd like to sit down with people and do interviews from every kind of industry and walk of life. I really just like learning about people. I think I really enjoy having good conversations, and I can cover a lot of different topics. But what I'd like to cover today is the Batman. I was born in '89, so the year the original Tim Burton film came out, Batman. And obviously this is an iconic character that's lasted for generations and decades. And he's got a new movie coming out in roughly a month from this recording in early March. So I have been really excited for this film. That means nothing to anyone except me, so let me explain. I've been really excited for this film because I think it could be a step towards possibly them learning the right lessons from the last 10 to 15 years of movie making, of Hollywood cinema. Which I mean is, specifically since the movie's not out yet, all we have to go on is the marketing. And movie marketing over the last 10 to 20 years, or at least since I've been into it, and I graduated from film school in 2010, just for reference, and stayed on the independent scene in and around Chicago. But as I've been watching the industry for the last 10 years, especially with the marvelization of everything, in the MCU getting so huge, which was a lot of fun at first to watch, but I'll be honest and right out the gate say I was done with it at Age of Ultron before. I really didn't like getting the same story over and over, but again, that's a different episode perhaps. The reason this makes me excited for the Batman is that with the industry focusing so much on trailers and these micro trailers now because of YouTube and social media taking over the main way you get things out, you know, when I was a kid and I started going to movies, I would get excited just seeing a poster months and months before the film was even released. I would have no idea what the film was even about, but you saw a movie poster with the stars and you would fantasize and fill it in. And all the things that I hear people talk about on the internet today, right? Creating headcanon and creating expectations. But that was part of the fun. That's marketing. That's how you get people excited about something. So I think the need for Hollywood and movie marketers in general, I guess, to, you know, it's a documented trend of explaining the whole film to you before you get what you want, before you go to the theater, because you know, times were tight. People wanted to know exactly what they were getting when they walked into a theater. I can understand that from a certain perspective, but I also grew up in a time when you didn't get any information really. Obviously, everyone says there was no internet. There was no internet really. It was coming around. So your instinct wasn't to go look up every single detail.
Here come the dinosaurs. I saved you a trip to the library.
That's great.
Yeah, downloading is easy, too. You know, I can even send email on the internet. And of course, there's my personal favorite, live chat. That's how I met my new kayaking buddies. We'll check that out later, after the game.
So for the Batman, I've really tried to avoid that. I heard rumors about it. I got excited. In the last few years, I've had so many films ruined for me because they give you exactly what the film's going to be. There's never any real surprises. And that's why I like going to movies. I liked being surprised. I like having a story seeming like one thing and ending up being another. And not in this ham-fisted way that they've ended up being when they preach at you, where the story truly, it ends up in an unexpected place but could have gone nowhere else. And to me, that's a mark of a really good story, of a really good film, whatever you want to call it. And the Batman, when I heard about it and I heard that they were going in this more dark and gritty direction, I was actually excited. If any character is going to be dark and gritty, I think it should be Batman, based on his origins and based on who he is as a character. And that's what I hope to get into with this. But I really think that this is a chance for Hollywood and WB and DC to make their mark and distinguish themselves from the current landscape of both entertainment and cinema. You know, as you've seen with the Joker recently, doing more artistic comic book films, if you want to call them that, more artistic one-off type storytelling, getting back to what cinema was, at least in the 90s, and what it used to be, which is, you know, you were telling a 2-hour story and you could tell multiples of these stories, but they weren't inherently part of these larger franchises. So part of what I got excited about with the Batman when I heard about with all the trailers coming out was that it was kind of going to go back to basics. I remember hearing a lot of stories, of older people on the internet saying that when Tim Burton came out, they only had the one TV trailer and it looked so dark and gritty and nobody liked Michael Keaton for the part and everyone was talking about it and all you saw was the Bat logo. And I remember as a kid, that was me too. Like right when I was 5-7 years old, I mean, you saw the Bat symbol and that's all you needed. You got super excited. That's what the Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman has been doing to me. Like, this is my Marvel, I guess. What Marvel fans have been experiencing for the last 10 years, I kind of got it with this film finally. I saw a trailer, even the logo, where the lettering comes out and it's the kind of drawn sketch of the Bat logo that everyone's saying might be the gun that killed his parents. Oh my God. I mean, I think it's really clever. And part of what I want to go through, not just about the character, but about the way they've been marketing this character and marketing this film, I think has been really clever and really smart. And despite all the some of the industry drama that I've heard and some of the gossip that's been going around about Robert Pattinson not wanting to work out, which is concerning, I want to address that too. But I think overall they had a really good idea. And even with all the delays and it not because it was supposed to come out, during the pandemic and it's been delayed. So I think they've recovered very well from that delay. They've been playing it very smart. And although I have plenty of issues with DC and with the WB, but with DC as well, I guess you could say, with what, all the comics have been doing for years recently, with their characters and with the stories. I think that this movie isn't going to do what a lot of people are afraid of. I think it's going back to basic Bats. I think there will be some Selena Kyle. I think there's going to be a lot of people telling Bruce what to do in this film. I think it's a year one. I mean, people have said, I haven't looked up, again, I've been trying to avoid a lot of the deep conversation because I don't want to be overthinking it when I go into the theater. I really just want to enjoy this movie. But what I've gathered from commentary online that I listen to and the trailers themselves is, yeah, it's not going to be a super necessarily competent Batman. It's going to be a more emotional, and Bruce has always been an emotional character, especially early. I mean, he's born out of a terrible tragedy, who carves himself into this stoic icon of the night. He I think it's going to be a lot about him learning to be Batman and what it means to be Batman in Gotham and what Batman needs to be in this Gotham. And this is the whole reason I'm sitting here in front of this microphone talking right now, is because these trailers have shown me the first Gotham that I've really bought as a real life Gotham. I grew up on the animated series, which is not necessarily that everything has to be Art Deco, but without going the more stylistic route that Burton went with, the Art Deco, the heavily influenced 30s kind of architecture and shooting on sound stages and really kind of making it a heightened reality world where everything is constructed as it is on a movie set. Bringing Batman into the real world, although we've had plenty of comic book movies and he's done it plenty of times, I think this is the most. I think he's different as a character and he needs a certain style of film to really highlight his best attributes. I see Batman's such an interesting character because you have goofy versions of him, like the 60s and stuff, that I also grew up on and I love. He can do a lot of different things, and I'm okay with all of it. Like, I'm not a purist in that sense. Like, I'm okay with Adam West's Batman. I'm okay with a lot of different Batman. I think my preference is, like, when you get involved in the real, like, when you're introduced, like, cosmic stuff, like aliens or, like, magic, like, even Ra's al Ghul pushes the boundaries, like, it starts to undo a lot of that character because you get into the wider comic bookiness of the universe, which is fine if you want to tell those stories. And again, I have love for those stories as well, but I think Batman in particular is in a unique place to tell grounded stories via the vehicle of superheroes and supervillains. Even his villains to me have always been more artistic, I guess is the word, or more, I don't know what to say. They, because because they're all metaphors, right? I mean, all characters are metaphors. Or I heard it put really well once that a character should be an idea walking around in a person suit. So going off of that, like the Scarecrow is an idea for, obviously Fury's used a lot, and he has different versions, from the Arkham games to the animated series, and you can take his character in different directions and play with the themes of that character and what he represents. But, overall, Gotham is supposed to be an absolutely corrupt place. Like, this is supposed to be hell on earth when Batman comes around. Gotham manifests Batman as much as Bruce does. Like, that's the thing, is that, and I think that's what this film is going for. Again, the runtime is supposed to be something like 4 hours. It's supposed to be something incredible. So I can't imagine, with all, and all the gossip and mystery surrounding the villains, like the Riddler, the Penguin, Selena Kyle, Catwoman, like, how are they gonna intertwine all these guys? But I think that is the story. That's why it's called The Batman. I know there's a cartoon, but I don't think it has much to do with that. It's called the same thing, The Batman. But I think that idea that Burton played with as an origin story in the original 89 film of, there's a guy running around dressed like a bat in the middle of the night taking care of criminals. Like, it's gonna rub the cops the wrong way. It's gonna rub citizens a certain way. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Like, even watching the daily news, like, seeing a human interest story like that, like, they're gonna pick up on it. And I think Batman is an interesting perennial idea, because the more you update him, the more complicated and layered he kind of gets. Like, he doesn't really fade with time. You can kind of reinvent this idea, or, you know what I mean? Because the Batman is an idea, and that's what Christopher Nolan was exploring in his trilogy. And I think, obviously, with the untimely death of Heath Ledger, a lot of the themes that he could have explored in the third film that would have landed differently. I was actually just looking up the original plans for it. Couldn't find anything concrete, but, I think he was trying to tell a more cohesive overall story with all three films that got derailed by, unforeseen events, unfortunately, and we could have gotten something really cool that I hope Matt Reeves is picking up the baton with and saying, I'm going to make a 4-hour, gothic soap opera, and not in the way that it is for guys like me who grew up who loved the darker Batman. And I don't mean dark and gritty for dark and gritty's sake. Like, when Batman Begins came out, it was, to me, I was like, oh, we're getting the real Batman. I was obviously younger, but it was something that we hadn't seen, I'm trying to think, since Blade.
Half human.
Blade's mother was attacked by a vampire while she was pregnant.
Half immortal.
You got the best of both worlds. All our strengths, none of our weaknesses.
Now there's a Batman.
Like a dark, almost R-rated, Blade was R-rated, kind of superhero film. And I'm like, oh, we're gonna get like a actually scary Batman, because I think Batman should be scary. Like, that's the thing. I think this idea that he's the protagonist or the hero, like, he is the hero, but I don't think he should be necessarily always viewed that way, especially in a year one situation, especially in an early year situation where he's still figuring it out, because he is, as we meet him, I think he's, early 30s, maybe late 20s, when he becomes the Batman, when he's figuring out his identity as the Batman. And I think it is weird to have a guy dress up in a bat suit and crawl around on buildings at night. But then, at the same time, that you have to have the city, you have to have the characters to balance that out. I think, and that's what Reeves seems to be getting about it, is that the environment creates this character. It's not necessarily about the man himself, it's about the ideas it's about very human things that drive us to do certain things, I think that's why he's become such an iconic character in the last scene, and why generations of people have loved him, for their own reasons, and why he can be retooled and reimagined and put into all these different situations and still have a viable story to tell, whether it's something as silly as the 60s. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek take on him, but it's still great to sit down and watch and look and deconstruct in that way. And I look forward to just seeing the Batman as he's always been in my head put up on screen, hopefully, and being told just a good story, just a really good take on Batman that isn't clean, I guess, is overall the point. And I don't mean clean. That's not afraid to ask questions about the character. It's not. He doesn't have to be Val Kilmer. You know, my favorite in the first Batman was Batman Forever. I know a lot of people don't like that, but you know, that in my head is a really good representation in a way, because it walks the line. It's not full on Batman and Robin, which everyone agrees. You know, a lot of the consensus was kind of too goofy. But you know, Batman Forever was not all the way there yet. It had its dark moments with Val Kilmer, and I always enjoyed him as an actor. And I was a kid, so I was right in the pocket for that film. Yeah, I was the target audience, and it worked. But that film with Tommy Lee Jones, and it was goofy, but it was dark. It was a kid's film, but it really wasn't, because it was stepping back from the Tim Burton really dark Batman Returns, right? That was the whole point. That's why they handed the franchise over to the Schumacher. Well, that's fine, but I mean, Batman's inherently a tragic character. Like, these are inherently heavy stories, and I think I have no problem with him being, you know, he's a kid's character. Comic books are, you know, he was originally intended for children, but I think he's always been a more mature character. And to handle, you can tell I don't want to say age appropriate, I don't know, you can tell a easily accessible story that deals with heavy themes if you understand and respect the character, understand and respect the world and the universe. Again, at a certain point, I think that kind of, you know, it's death of the author. Does it matter who created him? Does it matter? I don't mean like credit-wise. I mean like, does the character exist in our own minds? Does he become part of the cultural collective? You know, do we all own him in that way? But I still think there are certain guidelines and things that guide that before he becomes not Batman and just another generic masked hero or whatever else he becomes. And so, like, as I mentioned earlier, like, I heard reports of Pattinson with the break and the delay in filming, he like kind of got out of shape and he was refusing to work out, and he was kind of maybe being a bit of a diva on set. And but the trailers have done a lot to dissuade, is that the right word? Take away my fears of that, because those action scenes look tight. I heard one, actually it's sad because one of my favorite commentators said, oh, you know, that the Batmobile jumping through the fire, we saw that in BVS and it's nothing new. And I want to be like, yeah, I have a feeling, man, at least for me, I'm going to cheer at that moment in the theater. Like, I don't think, it's not going to be brand new. It's not going to blow my mind as far as a new action sequence in cinema or something. But again, you don't have to do anything huge and new, and you know, it's doing the fundamentals really well. It's doing the things that work really well and knowing why they work and how they work and when to use them. Not that this stunt has to be the centerpiece. I'm just saying all of the action I've seen. There was a Contact. I watched the last trailer, the final trailer, just before recording this, and I saw a Contact with like nanotech in it. The scene of the machine guns just blowing at him, and he's just stepping up to these guys, emptying clips into his chest. Like, that's the Batman. And it's like, that guy, like, you don't care that he's wearing bat ears and a cape. You know what I mean? He's a fucking demon of the night coming for your soul. And that's what needs to happen. The older trailers that show him beating down one of the thugs in the street, that just like going after him. I think this marketing, at least this campaign, this what I've seen, I think it feels the most like the idea of Batman I've had in my head, and that's I'm excited to see that carried through and played out in a larger story. Opposite this Paul Dano's Riddler, which I think, I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I am really excited to see like a really dark take on the Riddler. I'm not I've been accused of being an edgelord. I swear to God, I'm not, and personally, but I feel like, you know, again, you're dealing with criminals, you're dealing with supervillains, you're dealing with people that are going to be ultra violent, that are going to be on the fringe of society. They're going to be, you know, these are extreme characters. They're meant to be and not only that, from a storytelling perspective, they need to be, to make the point. Again, their ideas in people suits. You know, I'm not going to dive into what I think they are because I haven't seen the film, but you know, I have inklings of what this film might be dealing with, and I'm excited to see these characters kind of taken I don't say taken seriously, because you can take them seriously and have them be silly. Like I said, I'm excited to see them explored in a way that makes the themes and whatever the takeaway is going to be of the film, it's going to make it more relevant to everyday audiences. You know what I mean? Like, these are not good people. Life is dangerous. Evil exists. Bad people are out there. You know, when there is a Batman that arrives, like, I'm not saying that vigilantism, again, the real world debate is much different, but the idea, we all have these kind of power fantasies. We all have these ideas. We all want to be the hero. We all want to stop the bad guy. You know what I mean? And not only that, what I'm excited about the Riddler being apparently the main villain, or who I think is going to be the main villain, is that it's going to get into the detective of the Detective Comics. We're going to see Bats having to match wits with a guy. We're going to see him possibly be shaped by these characters, by these events, by these people he engages with. And I don't think you get that out of a lot of... Christopher Nolan tried to do it, but it felt a little too schmaltzy to me. Don't get me wrong, I love The Dark Knight and all due respect to those films. I think they get talked about so much, they kind of get posted up to, like anything. If you talk about it enough, it's going to be overhyped. And they were released years ago, but I think he opened the door for this in a big way, obviously. And I'm really excited to see Batman have to use his brains and not just his gadgets, but it looks like he's got some awesome gadgets too, and some really cool fucking action scenes where he's just gonna go psychotic on some, as much as he's out of favor these days. Kevin Smith used to say, I used to love him, he'd punch evil in its turkey fucking neck, and that's all I want to see. When I see Bats come down and just punch evil in the face, but then have to go against an actual mastermind kind of super villain, not just in his powers, but in his villainy, and have to rise to the occasion. And I think that's what it could be. And he's going to have complicated relationships with Gordon, with Selina, with the cops, with right and wrong, with law and order versus vigilantism. And I think these are some of the ideas that we're going to get out of this performance and out of this story. And I'm very excited for that, because it's a different kind of, not just Batman story that we haven't gotten in a long time, but a different kind of superhero and comic book movie, and hopefully raises the bar a little bit from the fucking Avengers. Sorry, guys. I loved... There's a lot to love there, and I'm not going to shit on them, but I have a lot to say in the MCU, I guess, too.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next products.
And as far as the length, I don't know how people are feeling about the length. I'm excited. I actually think it's a positive. I think they didn't... After the Snyder Cut and the 4-hour release, people will watch trash for 4 hours. And I like the Snyder Cut better, and I like the original. And, I don't know. I was rooting for Snyder for a long time, but after the Army of the Dead release, or whatever that hell thing was on Netflix that he did, and yeah, no, I'm just not. I'm kind of down on Snyder lately. But what I do respect is that he tried to bring comic book characters to an elevated level. I don't think he was necessarily the guy to do it, but I can appreciate the larger ideas at play there. So I think having a 4-hour gothic soap opera, I think these characters, I guess is what I'm saying, I think these characters can hold up that runtime. I think you're gonna get some really, I hope they take this runtime and use it to explore the themes between all the different characters and Bruce / Batman. Like, when he interacts with Selina, he, that comes to a full story. The Penguin probably has a full story arc. I'm hoping, he has a role in the larger story that has to play out, while the main Riddler bad guy is going to be in the background, obviously teasing the whole time. He's going to be the big bad. I'm excited just for the story I'm writing in my head. And that's what I miss. I miss being able to do this. I'm okay with not knowing everything, because I think what I'm going to get is going to be just as good, if not better. I'm hoping. And it couldn't be. But you know what? The fact that I don't know is going to get me to go into the theater and buy the ticket and not just watch it at home. Because frankly, I'm over movies in general. And that's This isn't going to be this way for everybody, but I am really excited that this could be what brings movies back to being movies again. I don't know. We're in this era of streaming. We're in the era of everybody watching it at home. I know this is going to be an uphill battle, but to me, this is, in my heart, this is the movie that brings people back to the theaters. Or it should be. If I get my way and it is everything I want, which who knows? I could be totally off, but that's the fun of this, of recording it, right? Is to get my thoughts out there. The other thing I want to say, I guess, too, is I think part of why I felt the need to talk about this was because a lot of people in the last, since The Dark Knight came out, Batman Begins, a lot of people have overused the term dark and gritty. A lot of people have complained about, that's all we ever got, and then we try to make things too dark and gritty, and I agree. A lot of Marvel should not be dark and gritty. I think Marvel can tell really dark and gritty tales. One of my favorite, other than Batman, my favorite superhero was always Spider-Man, who was like the bright, shiny Batman to me. While Batman ran around nighttime in Gotham, Spider-Man was out in the daytime. He was bright, he was red and blue. But likewise, he wasn't necessarily taken as a hero. J. Jonah Jameson was after him. He had some real tragic personal stories. He was constantly losing. And to me, that was what drew me to these characters, I think. So it wasn't just the dark and gritty. It was that these are the stories that I responded to because they were human stories. They were real problems that these guys dealt with. I, even as a kid, could relate to, like, having to make difficult choices. I understood what, I could sympathize with the characters, even if I didn't understand specifically I couldn't relate to the actual experience of being a college student or flying around the city or whatever. And so, Batman started as a pulp character. He was based on the Shadow and, can't forget what else. I kind of forget what else. I didn't look it up. But, one of my all-time favorite characters is the Shadow as well. And this was a guy that ran around with dual 45s and took out gangsters in the middle of the night and threw them over bridges. And Batman used to use a revolver in the original Inception too. So, not that that's what he needs to be doing now. I'm not here to have that debate, but I just think that, when people accuse Batman of being too edgy or Batman is, you're an edgelord, I'm like, have you looked at the character? Did you read a comic book? Like, yeah, that's the point. But that Batman, to me, as a character, owns all of that. Again, because he knows that being the idea is more important than being the guy. That's what Bruce Wayne is for. And I think that the struggle with that, and that's where this film, I hope, takes it, is exploring that idea and him coming to that realization and that conclusion of, like, this is who I have to be versus who I want to be, kind of thing, and what he thought Batman was going to be versus what it needs to be for the city and for his goals ultimately. That being said, I think it's funny because I opened up by kind of bitching about comic book movies and the serialization, and or at least I have privately a bunch of my friends that, I hate what everyone says, it's constantly Act 2, there's no end to these stories. And yeah, Batman falls in the same kind of arena, but with this, Pulp Fiction inherently was cheap commercial entertainment that came from pulp paper that it was printed on, which was cheap, yellowish type paper. And, this is where a lot of great writers got their start, writing these dime store novel mystery tales about characters that, some of them went on to become major, cultural iconic characters. Dashiell Hammett's and, I'm confused, I can't remember the one, Ray Chandler's, those guys. A lot of these guys wrote for these, like, dime store pulp magazines at first because they needed money or whatever. I want to do a whole episode on the history of pulp. I love it. But, Batman became, same thing with comic books, right? And Batman was born of this pulp character put into the comic book, which was the kids, a children's entertainment, essentially, of the day. So you're taking, what was adult entertainment and fusing it into children's entertainment, and voila, you got this kind of, like, mature character dealing with heavy themes, but presented in a very kid-friendly, age-appropriate way. And I think that's why he's had this universal appeal. And I think that if you go back to his origins, even telling these dark and gritty, overly serious, whatever, if you're going to criticize it, I think by taking it back to that place, you can tell multiple stories. Maybe not 20 of them a year like Marvel tried to do. I think, if you're going to release a 4-hour movie, I hope we at least get a bit of a breather to digest all of this that you're giving us.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
But I would be very okay with like a continuation of this. If the stories need to be told, if you have an actual story to tell, not just a sequel to make, like, because these are very rich, deep characters. This is a rich universe to draw from. And I think, like anything, even like a Sherlock, if you tell the same kind of story, you give him a new take, a new problem, again, you pick a different theme. It's a very flexible character. It's a very versatile character that can be applied in a lot of different situations that don't all have to be dark and gritty. But I think going back to the origins kind of reboots it for the modern era in a way that will refresh. It satisfies both masters, right? So, like, Hollywood wants cheap, easy storytelling that they can produce a bunch of to sell to you, over and over again. They don't want to have to think too much about it. They want something that you're going to show up to.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
Bam, you got Batman. But it also serves, guys that watch too many movies like me, people that are, above your average viewer, that understand a little bit more about the character, that just want better stories in general. And I think it serves that audience as well, in that, like, we're getting enough story, enough character, enough respect as an audience to want to come back to this world, to want to come back to these filmmakers, to see more of this world, as opposed to just being force-fed like by a fire hose with content and just bright, pretty colors jumping across screen. And this is not to diminish any of the work that's gone into a lot of these films. Again, like, years and years of effort and hard work. And I mean, I hate to say, you hate to think about how many people work on these things for hours, and like, these are people's lives that, and then you get like Loki or whatever they're doing nowadays. And again, I'm not here to have that conversation right now, but I hope that it might be the Unforgiven. What Unforgiven was to Westerns, I'm hoping that the Batman can be to comic book films. It's the signal of an end of an era, but a bright shining light towards the future, where we need to bring cinema back. We need different stuff to the cinema. Unfortunately, we have to use what we have available to us to get there, and what Hollywood is buying is comic book movies still, for some reason. And I guess, they're clearly still profitable, so... But I think this is a way to open up that, now that we've gone all the way to the multiverse, and we've completely changed what the public perception is of the general understanding of comic book films. I think we can start bringing it back the other way and start having the pendulum swing the other way to smaller, more focused films. Things that don't need a decade to develop for limited payoffs. Anyway, so that's my thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoyed too. I hope to hear back. If I'd love to discuss it further. So if anybody actually does end up hearing this, please feel free to get in touch. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much.